Good day, two-wheeled friends, and welcome to another episode of MC Commute. My name's Zack, and we're gonna ride to the office on this lovely machine. Today's guest, which is Yamaha's MT-10, formerly known as the FZ-10, based on the YZF R1, of course. So we'll talk about what makes the MT different from the FZ, and we'll talk about what makes this platform a little bit different than the R1. We got sort of a weird day here. California's burning, so there's wildfires and this weird golden light. So my camera's not broken, I promise. And if you see some snow, it's just ash, which is kind of scary. But anyway, off we go on this commute, and we're gonna learn about Yamaha's MT-10. Yamaha's MT-10, we'll take a closer look at some of this stuff here. 320 millimeter rotors, I believe, and what appeared to be R1 brakes, but they're not R1 brakes. Really, they're similar componentry, but some different internals in the caliper and different master cylinder, and we'll talk about what all that means. Some handsome LED turn signals, which I appreciate because I always make fun of Yamaha's ugly orange turn signals, and these are not orange or ugly in my opinion. They are still a little bit fragile, as you can see. See, I taped this one because it broke off. I mean, you have to, break it, which is something we did. Obviously, we hit it with our leg in the shop or something. But anyway, what else we got here? You got that gray and high-vis paint there, although this is a little bit more metal flake, a little bit more standard silver color than that weird kind of liquid gray that the FZ-10 was when it came out. So slightly different, but same idea. CP4 engine, which is arguably the best part of this bike, that crossplane R1 mill. Yeah. Silky smooth. Cool. I'm excited. All right. Shall we get going? So we'll get some specs out of the way right off the bat, as usual. That is a 998 cc. Wow, that is a Ford Fiesta running a stop sign. That's also fun. Anywho, that's a 998 cc inline 4, as I was saying, with the oddball cross-plane firing order thing, which is why it sounds funky. That's why it sounds cool, in my opinion. People often think it's just an R1 engine. It is largely an R1 engine in that, it shares a lot of parts, but it has an updated crank, it has a bigger airbox, it has different cams, different cam timing, different ports, different connecting rods. I mean, the engine is quite a bit different than an R1 engine. Actually, they updated a lot of stuff, not least of which the exhaust, which is a little bit tighter opening at the end, and yeah, so it's all designed to make more power down low, because that's the way that this bike was expected to be ridden, and of course that's how we'll ride it today, unlike the R1 where they just basically try to make power everywhere. Sorry, not everywhere, but up top where you are on a racetrack. You keep it on the boil. But anyway, the engine is much different, and that's an important thing to remember. Much different than the R1, but it still has that lovely sound, which I think is great. So that's in a little bit of contrast to the differences between the FZ-10 and the MT-10, which people have been asking about, which is fair. There are basically none between the FZ-10 in 2017 and the MT-10 in 2018. There is a standard quick shifter now, for which Yamaha did not raise the price, as someone pointed out, which I thought was pretty smart, and that's a nice feature. Basically the name change, and also I think, if I'm not mistaken, the ride modes used to be standard A and B like that, and now they're 1, 2, 3, as you can see down here. Take a look at that dash. So you got mode 1, most aggressive, mode 3, which is softest, and then in the middle is mode 2. That's where I like it, right in the middle. And I guess while we're at it, we can show you the traction control. Say control TC, so you can see it goes up 1, 2, and 3 modes, which is nice. I like it in TC1. I think there's a lot of glorification of really fancy electronics on bikes, you know, suspension that adjusts itself as you ride down the road, and umpteen different settings for every little thing, and launch control and wheelie control. And you know, I really don't, on the street, I don't find myself wanting that stuff. And I think the MT-10 is an interesting example of, you know, a company just saying, like, here's what you need. You know, you need a few options for traction control, and wheelie control is tied in there, and you can turn it on or you can turn it off, whatever you want to do. Otherwise, have fun. And I like that. So now is usually when we talk about ergos. That's one place where the MT-10 differs greatly from the R1, obviously. I don't remember the seat height off the top of my head. Gosh darn it. I was memorizing all that engine stuff, so I guess I got distracted. But it is lower than an R1. Also, obviously, the handlebar is quite a bit taller. About 10 inches taller, if memory serves. And the foot pegs are quite a bit lower. All of that means that you're pretty upright. It's also sporty. You're sort of like in a commanding sport riding position. Someone asked how it compared to the Ninja 1000, and I think that's actually a really great question, because the Ninja 1000 and the MT-10 to me are very comparable bikes as far as sort of sporting performance, and I see them as similarly kind of capable and comfortable. And I should clarify that the reason I think it's a good comparison to the Ninja 1000 is sort of the ethos of the bike, and the ergos to a certain extent. But you know, so on something like an Aprilia Tuono, the bar feels a lot lower and wider and just way more aggressive, and the pegs are really high. So yeah, I feel like it's a little bit more relaxed. Also, it's kind of similar to a Super Duke, I think. Much wider in the middle than a Super Duke, though, because of that inline 4 instead of a V-twin. It's much fatter in the middle. I got so distracted talking about the engine when I was talking about specs, I didn't really talk about anything else. It is a 4.5 gallon tank, and the bike weighs around 467 pounds, I think, about 465, 470, something like that. So heavier than the Superbike, predictably. So they used, they used steel in a bunch of places where on that bike they used magnesium or aluminum. This bike is arguably closest to the R1S, which uses those aluminum wheels, and it has a lower rev ceiling and stuff, but it's not just an R1 engine that they slapped in there. It's not the case. That engine that makes that noise. Oh my god. Ugh, so good. It's so much fun. It is just absolutely delicious to use. It's so good. And sometimes people compare this bike to the Jukes 1000, which is another fair comparison in my opinion, because the Jukes 1000 is affordably priced, more so even than the MT-10. To me, the FZ10 is so much better than a GSX 1000. I think it's just more charismatic. It's a little bit more comfortable. The Jukes is, it is faster. It makes more power, I think. Also, the wheelbase is something like 3 inches longer, which means it just accelerates a lot faster than MT-10. The MT-10 wheelies. But for me, if I'm not on a racetrack, I guess I don't really care. I think the compromises that Yamaha made on this bike are exactly in line with the kind of riding that it suggests you should do, I guess. All right, we got a minute. We can look at the rest of the dash features. You got your fuel gauge on the right here. You got trip on here. Trip meters is all pretty basic stuff. I think if you hold this down, yeah, you can change this number between coolant temp and air temp, which are not as far apart as I would like them to be today like this. As you can see, it's just about 100 degrees. Back to the fuel gauge. It does the same thing that the Tracer does. The first bar is the whole first half a tank, and that's kind of a frustrating thing, I think. Even more so with the fact that this bike gets crummy fuel mileage for some reason that I haven't really been able to figure out. Oh my god. Ugh. I know I talk a lot about how much fun engines are because, well, engines are fun. It doesn't take much to entertain me, I guess. But this one really is it really is a doozy. Back to fuel range, sorry. It gets really crummy mileage for reasons that we haven't necessarily been able to suss out. We ride the bike the same way as we ride most other bikes, especially ones in the category. And yeah, it just seems to get low 30s for mileage. And the fuel light is kind of conservative. So it usually comes on at about 115, 120 miles. Perhaps my least favorite thing about it is that it betrays the capability of the bike as an everyday machine, and even as a sort of sport touring machine, because it's comfortable and it works really nicely. So if it had 200 miles of range, you'd be thinking, yeah, absolutely, take it on a nice long road trip. But you got to make sure the gas stations are pretty close to each other on this thing. Oh, it's hot. As we shoot away from a stoplight, I can tell you that someone on Instagram asked, does it really feel like it makes more torque than an R1? And to that I would say, yes, it does, because it actually does, through a certain part of the rev band, make more torque than an R1. In the 6,000 to 7,500 range, it makes 15 or 20% more torque than an R1 does, which is, I don't know, not nothing, more than a super bike. It's also geared lower, so the internal ratios on this bike are the same as an R1, but the final gearing is 2 teeth shorter on the rear sprocket. So yeah, it actually is geared shorter and makes a little bit more torque. And it's really, really fun. The little fairing it has here doesn't do a whole lot, frankly. I mean, the wind still hits you in the, top of the stomach. Come on there, Honda Accord. But yeah, it is a comfortable bike on the freeway. And again, it's just sort of too bad about the fuel range. Yeah, right on. Little CBR 250, go get them. So I had been riding with the Comfort seat, which I believe was an upgrade we got from Yamaha. It's just a little bit thicker seat, which makes it slightly taller and also a little bit more comfortable, in my opinion, especially if you have long legs. I should say, though, the seat-to-peg ratio is pretty reasonable on this bike. Reasonable enough that when you take it to a racetrack, for example, the pegs drag pretty easily. I don't ever have a problem dragging pegs on the street, because I don't typically ride all that fast on the street. I have heard people complain that in tighter corners, or if you really push it on the street, then the pegs drag, but I don't see that as a problem. I see it as a just sort of a convenience, maybe, that the bike's letting you know that you're going fast enough. If it were my bike, I would probably consider getting some adjustable rear sets that would allow me to put the pegs up a little bit higher when I wanted to take it to a track day, and then drop them down when I had it on the street. But that's just me. Another thing that's worth addressing is a comparison to the Tracer 900, the old Goo GT, as we rode recently on MC Commute, so look for that video if you haven't seen it yet. That bike and the MT-10 are the same price, I believe, 13 grand, 12,999, and they offer sort of similar capability in some ways. They're reasonably upright and comfortable. The Tracer more so. They both have wicked engines. I would argue the MT-10 more so. And they all have decent features. Cruise control, nice dashes. Some people have been asking me which one to get, which one's better. That's a question that I can't answer for you, I'm afraid. If you are as in love with the cross-plane inline 4 as I am, then you'd probably go for the MT-10, because it does have a little bit more punch, 130 horsepower instead of 100 and whatever it was, 105 maybe. So yeah, I think I like the extra stomp that the MT-10 has. I like the naked bike thing, personally. And for me, that would be worth it, because I like the idea of going to a track day. And I don't know what I would do about the fuel range. I guess I'd maybe try and flash ECU, or do something to it to lean it out and get a little bit better mileage out of it. But I guess that's something I would suffer through, because I think this bike's rad. But if sport touring is more your thing and you don't think you'll go to a track day, then I think the Tracer 900 would be a pretty good option too. Or the Ninja 1000, come to think of it. I think the Ninja 1000 is actually a great bike, and arguably a good split between the Tracer and the MT-10, for what it's worth. Easy to get distracted about all the options you have, The mirrors on the MT-10 are okay. They're not great, if you ask me. They're like, I get a pretty good view of my elbow. I think they would be quite a bit better if they were just up and out a little bit more. Excuse me. But of course, then they'd be dorky, which nobody likes that. It's really, really fun. And you can feel the power flatten out a little bit, where on a super bike you'd get up, toward 5-digit RPM, and it would just kind of come alive. That's not the case here. The fattest part of the punch on this bike is 6 to 8,000, I think, arguably 6 to maybe 10. But yeah, that's where you want it. Again, I think it's wisely engineered. Oh my god. This bike always has done terrific wheelies, but the quick shifter is a great addition. It is a stupendous addition to this bike. It's so good. It makes it so much fun. Another thing that I would be remiss not to talk about would be comparisons to all of the other bikes in the category. Basically, the way I see the MT-10 is I think that it's kind of better than the offerings from Japan. I should say I haven't ridden the new CB1000, which has been updated a little bit as far as the Z1000, the Jukes 1000. I think the MT-10 has them licked. It is more expensive than a Jukes, as I said, and the Jukes does offer some things that the MT-10 doesn't. But to me, this is the best balance, and it sort of mops the floor with the other Japanese competition. So that puts it in competition with your Tuono 1100, your Super Duke, your Monster 1200, your BMW S1000 single R. And to me, the MT-10's a little outclassed there, but it is quite a bit cheaper, right? I mean, you're talking about paying 13 grand instead of 18 for a Super Duke or something like that. 130 horsepower, it doesn't stack up to a Tuono or a Super Duke or an S1000. I mean, those bikes are laying down 150 horsepower. This bike is just sort of, yeah, it's maybe one step down from that. It's a terrific motorcycle, and it's well worth the asking price considering the competition, in my opinion. Can you back it in? We got a little something there. And of course, we've already explained that it does do wheelies for days and days if you wanted to. God, it's good. Holy crap. Backing it in doesn't work so well because it's got the old ABS. You gotta kind of trick it. It doesn't work all that well. And also, I need to mention that I think the front brake is crummy. It has different componentry, like I said, from the R1 brake, and it's just not good. It's okay, and Yamaha claimed that they calibrated it to, street riding the same way they calibrated the rest of the bike to street riding from the R1, but it needs sharper brakes. In my opinion, it's along with the fuel range, is a weakness in the bike that really stands out to me. A bike that just doesn't really have a lot of weaknesses. I think it's pretty terrific in general. My boy Spencer Robert had a FZ10 long-termer that he experimented with some different front brake componentry. He put braided lines on there. Some people asked about that. He tried that. It didn't really help that much. It seemed like the biggest and best thing you can do is just sharper pads. Some sintered pads, give it a little bit more bite, would be the best route to go, or at least that's a place to start. If you want to revamp the whole system, I honestly would recommend it, because remember, this bike weighs more than a super bike does, and it makes, you know, almost as much power, so why not have good binders on there? That's what I'd recommend. Oh my god, is that not just a fabulous sound? Whew. Okay, there you have it, MT-10. I'm a fan. Big surprise, right? Zack loves motorcycles. So we're going to answer some social media questions now. I saved some of your many questions. We were getting up toward 200 questions there. It's pretty intimidating. The driver's perspective asked, what quality of life improvements have been made to this bike over the years? How does it stack up against Triumph's Street Triple RS on the street? Street Triple, sort of a different animal. Street Triple to me is sort of like a middleweight naked bike, and it is ultra refined. I mean, the Street has brilliant brakes and a brilliant dash, but it doesn't have the heft and the power that this bike does. If I had to choose between them, that would be very tough. That Street's an awfully good bike. Awfully good, and it rips around a racetrack. How does the 10 suit a tall guy? I'm 6'6", and my MT-09 is one of the comfier nakeds I've ridden. Yeah, you'll find the same basic comfort here. This bike is wider between the knees, and I think maybe not quite as much legroom as an MT-09, excuse me, but it'll be pretty good. Hey, there's Ari Henning. There he is. Look at him go on that Tuono. That's how I know I was comparing it to the Tuono, because I rode his little tester there. What characteristic difference between MT-10 and CB1000R? I think the CB1000 handles better. From a pure chassis standpoint, it's lighter, it's more direct, but other than that, I think the MT-10's got it licked. More power, more features, a little bit more comfortable. Yeah, hope that answers it. Is it too big for super small riders? I'm 5'4". Whew. Yeah, 5'4". Again, it comes down to confidence. I bet someone who's 5'4" can ride this bike just fine if you're up for it, but it weighs the better part of 500 pounds, so you're going to want to sit on it and make sure first. Zack McColgan. Yeah, right on. What's up, Zack? MT-10 versus Tuono 1100 RR. That's the one that Ari just wrote in. Which would you prefer for commuting / track days? Okie dokie. I would prefer the MT-10 for commuting. I would prefer the Tuono for track days. So it's a matter of what you think you'll spend your time doing. The Tuono is a good commuter, actually. It works really nicely. It's pretty comfortable, but it's not as comfortable as an MT-10. When it comes to a racetrack, however, the Tuono absolutely shreds, and the MT-10 is good, not great. Clifford Benstead asks, do you forget about how ugly it is because of how good it rides? And that was the last question I had in there, because I think that's a great question. The looks are polarizing. I think it is kind of a funny looking bike, if I'm honest. It has all sorts of weird little kind of angles and spoilers and snorkels, and you know, it is a little bit funny looking. But to answer your question, yes, I think you would forget about that, because I don't think it matters. My personal bike is pretty ugly, if you ask me, but I love the way it rides, so I forget about it, and I think that's what more people should do, because the way a bike rides is the point. And as one very astute fellow said about my bike one time, at least you don't have to look at it while you're riding it. I thought that was actually pretty helpful. A good way to look at it. Okay, I hope that helps everyone. I hope you had fun on this ride. I sure did. Don't forget to check the links in the description of this video. I put some articles in there that I wrote about the FZ10, which apply largely to this bike, about how it differs from the R1, for example. Until next time, I hope you had fun. Thanks again for riding along. We'll see you next time.